Welcome to Changing the Face of Finance. I'm your host, Arthur Forbes, bringing 30 plus years of experience in finance and technology to our journey through innovation and strategy for the Office of the CFO. As founder of Changing the Face of Finance, I've helped CFOs and finance leaders through what I call CPM plus DNA, corporate performance management and data and analytics, and the people, process, and technology decisions underneath it. Today's episode is really an extension of a recent CFO panel at the Texas CPA Houston Stars Conference, where we covered evaluating ERP and tech stack options. My guest today, Matt Ciesinski, joined two other finance and technology leaders on that panel. And when Matt and I caught up after the panel, we had two stories I wanted to give more room. One from his time at Southwestern during the Shale Revolution, and one current at Summit Midstream. Both touch on what may be the harder question underneath every ERP evaluation. Do you really know going in what you're going to pick? Matt, would you introduce yourself to our audience?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, Matt Ciesinski, currently the Senior Vice President, Chief Accounting Officer at Summit Midstream Corporation here in Houston, Texas. If you go back through kind of my career, Arthur Andersen, Ernst & Young, did a stint at Key Energy. I spent a substantial amount of time at Southwestern Energy up near the Woodlands, Texas. Did everything from financial reporting, assistant controller, investor relations, economics and planning, commercial, did a little bit of everything. Then migrated over to the deep waters, Gulf of Mexico, and then have been since 2020. So going on, 6+ years. So
awesome. Thanks so much, Matt. Let's jump right into it. For the listeners, ERP, enterprise resource planning, is where the transactions live. The accounting, the supply chain, the close mechanics. And then around that ERP sits a broader tech stack. Planning, reporting, close management, analytics, data. When we talked at STARS, we touched the full stack. But in this conversation, I want to focus on the decision itself, the evaluation. Because Matt, you've now been through two of these in two very different situations. And one of them is right in front of you. Take us back to the first one, Southwestern Energy. What was actually pushing the decision then?
yeah, so two completely different kind of decision points from my experience at Southwestern and at Summit Midstream. At Southwestern, one of the early innovators on unconventional resources, predominantly with the Fayetteville Shale, and then that migrated up to the Marcellus Shale. But effectively, the accounting software they were using before, it could not keep up with the sheer volume of wells that we were drilling.
Okay.
I want to say that, I think we had clipped roughly $2 billion of CapEx a year at Southwestern, and it was roughly about, from the Fayetteville, it was about $3 million a well. So pretty substantial activity ongoing. And literally, if you think about the gerbil that is the accounting software, the gerbil was not able to run quick enough to keep up with what we were doing. And then also the CEO at the time, he wanted to come up with a solution kind of enterprise-wide. And then the accounting system that we had before, we had the Spirit kind of AFE process to track that. And then along with the system just for the accounting, and then the revenue system was different. And then on top of that, we also at the time, we had our own sand company, we had our own drilling rig company, we had rental equipment, and then we had midstream operations as well too. So pretty vertically integrated.
Right.
It just was not set up to handle that. And then ultimately through an assessment process, chose Oracle and went on a long journey to implement that. So.
Great. And so how long did that take?
I think it must have been about 2 years to implement. So we didn't go live with everything. Revenue just kind of has its unique issues in and of itself. So the actual revenue system was implemented a little bit later, just because that took a little time to kind of get through. But the core financials, kind of the planning, budgeting process, that was all kind of one fell swoop.
Right. And I think we talked about Who was leading this on your side? Was it finance, IT, engineering? Who all?
So it was a collaborative approach, but they took an individual out of operations and made him he was a great communicator, was able to kind of, bust through silos. And so it was just the great leader for that particular project. But, effectively they wanted an operations face in front of the implementation to make sure that they really had buy-in through that process. But certainly it was a collaborative effort between multitudes of
Right.
organizations within Southwesterners.
Yeah, and I think my experience over the years, I don't know how many operations folks really got involved in the ERP evaluation, selection, and implementation, right? They were kind of on the further end, and it was usually maybe initially or pushed by IT and getting CFO. So how did it all play out there? Do you recall?
So at Southwestern, it was a collaborative effort. But certainly, IT assisted with the selection process, coming up with identifying the criteria, and kind of guided us through selecting the software. We looked at, it was SAP and Oracle were probably the two front runners
Yeah.
that we looked at. And so they certainly helped kind of guide the process. But eventually, you had to make the decision of what software you wanted to go with and move on forward. And then at that point, it became, hey, put your best people on that particular project. I'll let them go.
Yeah, if I recall, I had an intersection there at one point, and it was one of those situations where I don't often see it, but you guys took people out of their real jobs to focus on that project. What was the impact there?
It was huge, so the people that were on the project were, problem solvers. They knew the business process. They could talk at the high level and then kind of down into the transactional subledger type detail. And across the board, each department put some of their best people on the project to get that implemented. So it was, but a lot of late hours. And then they also did something unique we just didn't necessarily have the real estate at the time as well too, but the implementation team was generally kind of the normal operations, because they knew it was too easy to get sucked back into your old day job. They said, hey, we really need to be, in one location implementing this. And so effectively the folks who were, myself was, I was, I guess, left behind, if you will, to kind of keep the accounting train on the track. But spent a lot of time going over for meetings and talking through kind of future process and what that was going to look like. So
Awesome.
certainly the heavy lifting was done by a lot of folks other than myself. But
Right. But the point I wanted to make there is that is a big commitment. But I think if I look back on experiences with other companies, I think those that invested in setting those folks apart and not having to do two jobs certainly got to the end faster and with more success.
Yeah, certainly there were a lot of conversations had with each department as we talked about what success was going to look like. And it was communicated that this is how you make the project successful, and we need to be pivoting toward kind of future state. And so that pretty much got buy-in from everyone across the board. And I think there were probably some horror stories that were told about what happens when you try to, if you stack the team with some folks who maybe don't necessarily have the kind of the technical acumen to think strategically and break up processes and break up status quo,
Right.
that you end up with the same old, the same bowl of cereal when maybe you wanted something a little bit different. So
Yeah, exactly. So now let's fast forward to different company, different chapter. Set the scene at Summit when you walked in.
yeah, so when I came on board February of 2020, so it was literally about a month before COVID hit. A little bit of background about Summit that we had received. The new CEO came on board in 2019, and he kind of quickly looked around everything at the organization. I think our general counsel's office was up in Dallas. We had engineering and operations up in the Woodlands, finance, HR, and a couple other groups were in Atlanta, Georgia. That was where the company was originally founded. And then we had some folks kind of up in the Denver area, and said, hey, we're all going to come under one roof at one place, and we're all coming to Houston, Texas. So when I came on board, I was effectively, hired to transition everything from Atlanta, Georgia to Houston. And so kind of went about trying to hire everyone in about a month. So it was a difficult time. And then we transitioned everything, within a couple months. Still had to do the SEC filings. I think I was the only me and the AP manager. AP manager was one of the first individuals I hired. We were the only people to actually meet who we were replacing in person. Everything else was done via Skype. Was accepted, but not necessarily something that everyone used. Teams by far was not what it is today.
Right.
So somehow we were able to kind of do everything remotely.
Zoom.
Yeah. And then, Summit at the time was under some financial duress or just distress. I'm sorry. And then they had some rifts along the way. So you kind of had to just make do with what you had.
Right.
My assessment of the accounting software at the time was it was probably not exactly what we wanted. We needed to do something different. Just given the leverage profile of Summit, I'd go every year for the budget and, hey, we need some money. And every year it was not going to be in the capital stack for that year.
Right.
And then finally, as we started doing some acquisitions and got out of our financial distress, kind of looking forward, said, hey, we need to go to do something from an accounting perspective. So we were on Microsoft X. So to give you some context of X, since I was there, they were basically stopping that software because it was an on-premise version, and they were effectively moving everyone to the cloud. So they effectively were no longer rolling out software patches for it. So basically, the way I think about it is, effectively put barbed wire and armed guards effectively around the server that we had, kept our accounting software, didn't touch it at all, made no enhancements, and we're just hoping for better days, clearer skies in the future. That day finally came, and so went through a selection process and selected the Oracle Fusion. And we go live here. I think we're talking here late June. We go live here in about a month in mid to late July. So.
Awesome. I think you mentioned starting the evaluation of you were going to go one direction. You ended up another, I think. And what were those?
Yeah, so the easy button, if I think of my Staples easy button, my initial thoughts were the best and kind of easiest process to go forward was AX, Dynamics 365, et cetera, the Microsoft product. They have a cloud version, and that's what they were pushing to. And so my initial thought was that was the easy button because they could basically take what we had, kind of replicate it in the cloud. But we decided, hey, we still want to go through and do a selection process to see what's the best software. And so we went through that selection process. Actually, the first thing we did was we mapped all of our processes out to kind of point out the manual aspect of everything that we were doing. And there's a lot of manual things that we do.
No doubt.
And so as we mapped that, that helped us kind of build out our software requirements, and then did effectively enough as a result of that. And then we looked at Oracle NetSuite, we looked at SAP, Dynamics 365, and Oracle Fusion. And ultimately, the software that was going to be the most out of the box, if you will, was going to be Oracle Fusion. And so that was what we really wanted to do, was drive towards no customization, just because customization creates and adds costs to operating your system going forward. So.
Yeah, and I got that as a talking point here in a moment, but I wonder on the whole process of evaluating that sort of thing. Did you hire external advisors, or did you have that experience in-house?
No, we hired an external advisor who was the same firm that assisted us with mapping out our processes. So he knew our pain points along the way, right? As we mapped those out. And that was really advantageous for us because as he was talking to this, hey, this is what they want to focus on. This is what your demo needs to show. This is what you need to be able to demonstrate. He was able to kind of drive the software presentations toward that. And so just as the software selection, it's a kind of a dog and pony show. And so you're not ever really going to see exactly how it's configured. So having him at the table, kind of, pointing out issues, helping us through the selection process, that was really beneficial for him to kind of be with us throughout the entire process. Very beneficial. So.
Yeah, awesome. I was wondering about that because too many times I think the companies see the demo first and it's like, oh, this is going to be great. And they never really evaluated their processes or even let their people know that this project was going on.
Yeah, and you have to recognize it, call it what it is, right? It is a sales pitch on their end,
Yeah.
right? So they're that, sometimes the sale versus what you live with are two different things. But so far we've been extremely happy with our process. So
Yeah, I mean, because it looks like the process, I mean, it would be how I would address it, right? It's understand the situation, what your readiness and complexity is, things of that sort. And then the process and the people. You can't forget those and just assume the technology is going to solve it all. So back to that view on customization. Walk us through that a little bit.
So as you inherently think about, where Summit is public, so I got to kind of put that out there. That so the from an internal control perspective, it's just going to be kind of a different environment, perhaps, than if
Absolutely.
you're a private company. But because you are
cloud-based
software, they are going to roll out updates effectively on a quarterly basis. So and in the old days, right under AX, I had my barbed wire fence and security guards protecting my on-prem server. In the future state with cloud computing, it's going to get pushed to you whether you like it or not. So if you customize, the amount of kind of assurance that the software company can provide to you that it's not going to be disruptive to your configurations and your software and how it operated on a day-to-day basis, they really can't guarantee that. So what effectively happens is they roll that software out on a quarterly basis. You're effectively kind of going back, and it's not a full-scale user acceptance testing, but you got to revalidate everything still works. So if you reduce or minimize the customization, then you have pretty high assurance that as they roll out these patches, that it's not going to disrupt, and your software is going to stop working, this morning, after they've updated the patches. So
Right.
and so that's a huge benefit because it's it is disrupting to go through and take your team off the month's close or whatever special projects they're working on to go back through and validate that this latest patch is not going to mess up your ability to write checks and send money out the door or apply payments from a customer. So.
Sure. What did the people think? The people and the that were in the processes in the software, were they concerned about having to change process to begin with to something more, I guess, out of the box? Oh, we got to do X, Y, and Z.
I would say that there are so many manual things that we do that there was general euphoria that we were not going to have to do these manual tasks that really
Perfect.
technology should be taken care of. Yeah, there's certainly from an organizational change perspective, you need to kind of manage that
Right.
throughout the process. But I think if you, from a selling point of hey, you're not going to have to move money around to record journal entries every time you move money around, that with the latest kind of cloud computing, that there's effectively a direct pipeline from you pick the bank, JP Morgan, directly to Oracle, where as transactions occur at the bank, they're automatically occurring in the general ledger, and all you're doing is just reviewing it for reasonableness, kind of validating some things. But generally speaking, you're taking a lot of manual processes out of your process. So hugely beneficial. So
Awesome. So if a controller or chief accounting officer is listening or being pitched on customization in some
hold
sort,
the line, hold the line. Yeah, get a stamp that says no. And then if folks ask, just when you think about it, Oracle, SAP, Dynamics, they got accountants there. They know what good looks like.
yeah,
And generally speaking, it's the company's issue that it is wandered or deviated from best practice at some point along the process. And it's looking for something that's probably not down the middle of the fairway. And if you can get the organization to understand the real costs of everything by, customizing, you can save some real money and save some time.
Well, and I think the key to that as well is at the beginning, evaluating the processes and looking for those opportunities where there were improvement.
Yeah.
Right. Where there variation in the process from one area to another. Oftentimes, where's this variation in the process? What's unique about that? And, that's just the way we've always done it.
Yeah. That was, as we went through everything, I was like, oh, that's what I was told from the previous, the person who trained me, and that's just the way it was. And you really got to take these implementations as an opportunity to reset your accounting processes and how you transact things and how you can, think about how can I provide better support to my customers, the real customers, and also the internal users of your financial information. So whether that's through AFE approval process or that you can, speed up the bank reconciliation or the account reconciliation process. So
let's see. Next question I got there. What was the signal for a controller or a chief accounting officer whose situation isn't as clean, or any advice basically you would share that they're at that point thinking about, we need to get something new, right? And it may be because they're being sold really well, or they really have seen, much like you did, there's opportunities for us to get better and provide
so I
more
think
information.
AI is certainly a kind of a triggering point, if you will. One of the things that I'm excited about is, we're going to have a data warehouse where we're going to map in a lot of information to a data warehouse, and then that will have effectively kind of an AI kind of platform sitting on top of it. So then you're going to have operational data, accounting data, and a couple other kind of data feeds that you're going to be able to unleash AI on to find things and kind of optimize processes. So if I would suspect that, if you're on a legacy accounting system that's not in the cloud, it probably, and maybe there's some type of connector to some type of AI platform. I don't know that you're really going to get, and maybe it's possible, but are you really going to be able to fully utilize AI going forward in terms of helping your company kind of streamline and improve processes?
Right.
So
That's underneath it. Right.
And then Oracle, and I'm sure all of them have it, they have, kind of agents per module, some out of the box agents to do various different things for you. So, and even an AI type developer kind of platform that you can use too. So
are you guys launching any of those agents as part of this initial phase?
that'll be phase 2,
Okay.
but certainly very quickly once we go live, that I know that's the next question coming is,
What's on your
using
short
AI.
list?
And we're already going to significantly improve our processes with Oracle alone. Then you add AI on top of that. Should be pretty impactful to us from an accounting and just a larger organization at Summit as well.
So let's look at those two different chapters, right? From your Southwestern Energy days and now to Summit. What's the thing you know now about ERP evaluation that you wish you had known the first time?
One of the things on my first implementation at Southwestern Energy is the sheer size of the organization at Southwestern. It was very large, and Summit is a much smaller entity. So my ability to connect and communicate throughout Summits, it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
It's 2 floors versus Southwestern, which was 2 towers. So it was a much larger organization. But I would say that when we went live with Oracle, it was like hitting a semi truck. It was just a lot of change. So from an organizational change perspective, at Southwestern, it did not feel real great the minute we went live.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say this: everyone I've talked to who's gone through an implementation, the feeling of getting hit by a semi truck is the same regardless of where you're at. And generally, it takes about probably 3 to 6 months before you kind of feel really good about what you've done. And you start seeing the synergies, and everyone's kind of feeling a little bit more comfortable with the operating system. So that I think the takeaway that I had was that if you're at a larger organization, just make sure you're really working through the organizational change management aspect of it to make
Right.
sure that everyone across the organization, has a kind of a keen awareness of what's happening, that the training is well thought out, because it's a large organization. You can end up with a bad situation where people just kind of have a bad taste in their mouth after they go live. I would say, probably after 6 months, I think everyone kind of understands it. So just make sure you're thinking through the organizational change aspect of it. But the smaller organization is a little easier to do. Bigger organization, probably a little bit harder to execute. So.
Right. Absolutely. As we finish up here, what is that one piece of advice you'd want to leave our listeners with about evaluating an ERP from the controller's or chief accounting officer's seat?
Yeah. So the one thing, and this was, high priority for me, and I learned it from Southwestern, was all these software companies have roles and capabilities for each, whether you're the accounting manager with Oracle or whether you're the accounts payable processor. So these roles are pretty significant in terms of what they allow you to do. So I would certainly be thinking through the internal controls in terms of segregation of duties and sensitive access, and make sure you're thinking about that well in advance. And you're probably going to want to have, some type of third party provider assist you and kind of guide you through that process, because that will, and I learned that through Southwestern. Yeah, the chief accounting officer there who was implementing Oracle at the time, he was really focused on that and wanted to make sure that was well thought out. So I'm at Southwestern, I'm taking notes. Okay, if you ever implement Oracle platform or not, or just the ERP software, be thinking about segregation of duties and get people involved in that well in advance. And so that was one of my lessons learned, and I applied that to my experience here at Summit. And we engaged a third-party consulting firm well in advance to kind of guide us through this whole process. Because what you don't want to do is go live on the first day you go live and realize that someone can approve and post their journal entries without it getting approved, or someone can send money out the door that shouldn't be going out the door.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much. Well, with that, we've reached the bottom line of our conversation. Matt, thank you so much for your time, for your insights, for your participation. 2 ERP stories, 1 career, and 1 really useful lesson for the listeners about what it means to let the process give you the answer instead of walking in with it. For our listeners, if what Matt walked us through resonates with the evaluation you're sitting on right now, you can continue the conversation with CFOF.
Appreciate it, and thank you for having me, and happy to give some advice to anyone who's listening to this podcast.
Awesome. Well, continue bringing insights to compound your success. I'm Arthur Forbes signing off from Changing the Face of Finance, where we are charting the course for the CFO of the future.